Okay, so you want to own a casino. On paper, this is supposed to be the most mathematically certain business on the planet. Every game is built with a house edge baked in. Roulette, blackjack, slots, craps. The odds always tilt slightly toward the house, and over millions of bets, that tiny edge turns into guaranteed predictable profit. It's not gambling for the casino, it's arithmetic. The house always wins isn't insane. It's a business model with the math already solved before you walk in the door. So if the math is guaranteed, how does a casino ever lose money? The answer has almost nothing to do with the games themselves and almost everything to do with what it actually costs to build and run the building the games sit inside. Start with the price of admission, and I mean that literally. In New York, the three companies competing to open the city's first full-scale casinos each had to pay a $500 million licensing fee just for permission, plus commit to a minimum of another $500 million in actual construction. That's $1 billion minimum before a single card gets dealt. One of the winning bids, backed by the New York Mets owner, is a full $8.1 billion development. Another operator paid $115 million just for the land. Even outside a bidding war that intense, a real casino resort routinely costs billions once you count the gaming floor, the hotel towers, the restaurants, the theater, and the parking. And a casino carries a cost almost no other business does. It has to keep enormous piles of actual cash sitting in a vault at all times, ready to cover payouts, completely idle, earning nothing, just to prove to regulators and players it can always pay what it owes. Not every path in is that expensive. Tribal casinos and smaller regional operations can open for a fraction of that, sometimes tens of millions of dollars rather than billions, under entirely different regulatory structures. But the boom grabbing headlines right now, the one reshaping entire cities, is happening at the billion-dollar tier, not the tens of millions one. Then there's the license itself, which isn't a one-time purchase. Casinos operate under continuous regulatory review, background checks, anti-money laundering compliance, gaming commission audits, all of it ongoing, all of it expensive. Losing that license over a compliance failure doesn't just cost a fine, it can end the business overnight. Because unlike almost everything else on this channel, a casino without a license isn't a struggling casino, it's an empty building that happens to have slot machines in it. Once it's open, the money comes in two broad categories. The first is gaming revenue itself, the house edge across every table and machine, typically running anywhere from about 1% on a well-played blackjack hand to well over 10% on some slot machines, multiplied across millions of individual bets a year. The second category is everything that isn't gambling, and at a modern integrated resort, it's no longer a side business. Hotel rooms, restaurants, retail, concerts, conventions. At many large resorts, this non-gaming side now generates somewhere between 40 and 50% of total revenue. The casino floor is what gets people in the building. The hotel, the restaurants, and the show are increasingly what actually pays the bills. There's a reason for that shift, and it connects directly to how casinos treat their best customers, because the biggest gamblers in the building are often barely paying for anything at all. Here's the mechanism almost nobody outside the industry understands. Those free rooms, free meals, and free show tickets high rollers get aren't gifts. They're a calculated percentage of a number the casino generates about you before you've even finished your first hand. It's called your theoretical loss, or Theo, and it's just math. Take your average bet, the game's house edge, and how many hours you play, and the casino can calculate almost exactly how much you're mathematically expected to lose over that session. A blackjack player betting $100 a hand for 60 hands an hour at a 1% house edge has a theoretical loss of $60 an hour. Casinos typically return somewhere between 30 and 40% of that back in comps, so that same player might earn $18 to $24 an hour in free rooms, meals, and credit, whether they actually win or lose that particular night. That free suite isn't hospitality, it's a marketing expense, priced to the cent, sized precisely to how much the casino expects to take from you over time. The house isn't being generous, it's reinvesting a slice of a profit it already calculated as guaranteed before you ever sat down. So if the math always favors the house, how does a casino still end up broke? Because guaranteed math only applies to the games. It says nothing about the building. A casino resort runs 24 hours a day, every day, and almost every cost inside it is fixed, whether the floor is packed or empty. Security, gaming staff, utilities for a building the size of a small city, debt service on however many billions it costs to build, none of that shrinks if the crowds don't show up, and the money to build it almost always comes from debt raised on the assumption of a specific steady level of foot traffic that has to materialize on schedule in a location that has to keep working against competitors who might open somewhere more convenient a few years after you break ground. Layer on top of that the one thing the house edge can't fully protect against: variance. Even with a guaranteed statistical edge, a handful of very large bets can produce a genuinely bad month, and a casino still has to make every single fixed payment on time, regardless of how the math happened to run that particular quarter. Which brings us to Revel. Revel opened on the Atlantic City Boardwalk in April of 2012, a $2.4 billion glass tower built to be the future of the city, sleek, modern, smoke-free, aimed at a younger crowd than the rest of Atlantic City's aging casino strip. It was, at the time, one of the most expensive casino resorts ever built in the United States. It struggled immediately. A $100 million cost overrun during construction, no players club at launch, and almost unthinkable oversight in an industry built on loyalty tracking, food and drink prices guests found genuinely off-putting, and critically, Revel never solved the day trapper problem. A huge share of Atlantic City's traditional customers came for a few hours without staying overnight, while Revel's whole design and its debt load assumed guests who'd fill its 1,700 hotel rooms. Then Hurricane Sandy forced a 6-day closure before the casino had even found its footing. Less than a year after opening, in March of 2013, Revel filed for Chapter 11, listing $1.5 billion in debt against just $1.1 billion in assets. The restructuring wiped out 82% of that debt. It wasn't enough. Atlantic City's overall casino revenue had fallen roughly 40% as Pennsylvania and New York legalized their own casinos, pulling regional gamblers away entirely. Revel filed for bankruptcy a second time in June of 2014, secured a $125 million loan just to keep the lights on during an auction, and still couldn't find a buyer at a price anyone considered viable. On September 2, 2014, after just over 2 years in business, Revel closed permanently. A firm called Brookfield offered $110 million for it and walked away from that deal too. It finally sold in 2015 for $82 million, a $2.4 billion building, changing hands for about 3 cents on every dollar it cost to build. The building itself didn't vanish. It reopened in 2018 under new ownership as the Ocean Resort Casino, running the same rooms on a fraction of the original construction cost, and this time it stuck around. The location was never the problem. It was everything stacked on top of that location before a single guest walked through the door. So does owning a casino actually work? At the scale of a Las Vegas mega resort or a well-run regional property with manageable debt, genuinely, yes, this remains one of the more reliably profitable businesses that exists, precisely because the math really is on your side. But the math was never the risk. You're not buying a machine that prints money because the odds favor the house. You're buying the fixed costs of a small 24-hour city built mostly on debt, betting that people will keep showing up in exactly the numbers your projections assumed. The math doesn't fail. Empty floors do.